She held two pink lines in one hand and her cheating husband's phone in the other. The same morning Sarah discovered she was pregnant, she found out her marriage was a lie. But here's what her husband didn't know. The $8 million mansion he was planning to take in the divorce, it wasn't his. It had never been his. And the moment he brought his 24-year-old mistress through the front door, posting it all over Instagram for the world to see, he walked straight into a trap 5 years in the making. This is the story of a billionaire CEO who lost everything she thought she had and gained something far more valuable. A story about hidden cameras, forged documents, a sister's betrayal, and a courtroom battle that would determine not just who got the house, but whether a mother would lose the baby she was fighting to protect. Because sometimes the person sleeping next to you is your biggest enemy, and sometimes survival isn't about winning, it's about everything. If you want to know how a woman brought down the man who tried to destroy her while she was carrying his child, stay until the end. And if this story resonates with you, show some love with a like, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you never miss a story about real strength and real justice. Now let's begin. She peed on the stick in the marble bathroom of their Silicon Valley mansion. Two pink lines appeared. Sarah Catherine Whitmore stared at them, her hands shaking. She was pregnant, 8 weeks along. She had suspected for a few days now, the exhaustion, the nausea, the tenderness. But seeing those two lines made it real. She was going to be a mother. Sarah pressed her hand against her still flat stomach and let herself smile. She and John had been trying for a year. She was 34 years old, the CEO of a tech analytics company valued at $1.8 billion, and she had built everything from scratch. But this tiny collection of cells growing inside her, this felt like the most important thing she had ever created. She needed to tell John, her husband of 6 years, the man she loved, the father of her child. Sarah cleaned up the test and tucked it into her purse. She would surprise him tonight, make it special. Maybe book that Italian restaurant he loved in downtown Palo Alto. Buy a little pair of baby shoes and put them in a gift box. She imagined his face when he opened it, the way his eyes would light up, how he would pull her into his arms, and his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Sarah froze. She was standing in the bedroom doorway. John was downstairs somewhere, probably in the kitchen, making coffee. His phone sat there on his side of the bed, screen lighting up with a notification. She should not look. She knew she should not look. But the message was right there on the lock screen, impossible not to see. Last night was amazing, baby. When can I see you again? I am already missing you. The sender name read simply, AH. Sarah felt the world tilt sideways. She grabbed the doorframe to steady herself. Her vision blurred. That could not be what it looked like. There had to be an explanation. Maybe it was a friend. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe... She picked up his phone with trembling fingers. She knew his passcode. It was their anniversary, 0618. He had said it years ago and never changed it. She had never had a reason to check his phone before. She trusted him. The phone unlocked. She opened his messages, and there it was. 4 months of conversations, 4 months of another woman, 4 months of explicit text, detailed descriptions, degrading comments about Sarah herself. My wife is so buried in work, she does not even notice I am gone. When are you leaving her? You promised we would be together. Soon, baby, after her next funding round. Then I take half and we are set for life. Sarah dropped onto the edge of the bed. Her whole body had gone numb. She scrolled further back, reading message after message. This woman, whoever AH was, had been sleeping with her husband since shortly after their 6th anniversary, 4 months ago. While Sarah had been working 80-hour weeks to close a major deal, while she had been trying to get pregnant, while she had been planning their future together, the text got worse. She is not even attractive anymore. All she talks about is work. I cannot wait to live in that gorgeous house with you. It is half mine, California law. She built it, but I own half. Sarah ran to the bathroom and vomited. Morning sickness, shock heartbreak, all of it hit at once. She knelt on the cold tile floor, positive pregnancy test in her purse on the counter, her husband's phone in her hand, reading about how he planned to leave her and take half of everything she had built. She wiped her mouth and kept reading. She had to know everything. The photos were what broke her. They were in this house, in the guest room down the hall. Timestamp, 3 days ago, 2 in the afternoon. While Sarah had been at a board meeting, John had brought this woman into their home, into the house Sarah had designed and built with her own money. Sarah took screenshots of everything, every message, every photo, every detail. She emailed them to herself from his phone, then deleted the sent message. She put his phone back exactly where it had been on the nightstand. She stood in the bathroom and stared at herself in the mirror. 34 years old, CEO of a billion-dollar company, 8 weeks pregnant, and her husband was planning to destroy her. She placed both hands on her stomach. "I am sorry," she whispered to the tiny life inside her. "I am so sorry your father is doing this to us." John could never know she was pregnant. Not yet. Not until she figured out what to do. Because the moment he found out, he would use it. He would use their child as leverage, as a weapon, as another way to take what was hers. Sarah straightened her shoulders. She was not just a betrayed wife. She was a strategist, a problem solver, someone who had built a company from nothing. And now she would use every skill she had ever learned to protect herself and her baby. But first, she needed information. The next morning, Sarah sat across from Catherine Romano in a coffee shop in San Jose, far enough from their Atherton neighborhood that no one would recognize them. Kat was 45, a former LAPD detective who had gone private 5 years ago. Sarah had used her services before for corporate background checks. She trusted her completely. "I am sorry," Kat said after reviewing the screenshot Sarah had forwarded. "I know this hurts. How can I help?" Sarah kept her voice steady. "I need to know everything. Who she is, how long this has really been going on, how much of my money he has spent on her." Kat nodded, making notes. "Give me 48 hours. 2 days later, Kat called Sarah to a different coffee shop. This time she brought a folder. "Her name is Amber Rose Hartley," Kat said, sliding photos across the table. 24 years old. Calls herself a lifestyle influencer. Has about 47,000 Instagram followers. Sarah stared at the photos. Blonde, young, pretty in that generic Instagram way. Everything Sarah was not. "They met at the Equinox gym in Palo Alto 5 months ago," Kat continued. "She lives in a $4,200 a month apartment in Venice Beach. That is a 2-hour drive from Atherton, by the way." "How does she afford that?" Sarah asked. Kat's expression hardened. "She does not. Your husband does." She slid a stack of credit card statements across the table. "I need you to look at these carefully." Sarah reviewed the documents. Her stomach turned. It was a corporate American Express card from Whitmore Analytics, her company. But she had never authorized this card. The signature on the application looked like hers, but it was not quite right. "He forged your signature," Kat said, 6 months ago, "and he has charged $167,000 to it since then." Sarah went through the charges line by line. $25,000 for Amber's rent, $31,000 at Tiffany, $18,000 at luxury hotels, designer clothes, expensive dinners, cash advances. Every dollar was stolen from her company. "This is felony embezzlement," Kat said quietly. "Corporate fraud. You could have him arrested." Sarah was 9 weeks pregnant now, still hiding it, still pretending everything was normal at home. She went to bed next to John every night. He kissed her goodbye every morning. He told her he loved her, and all of it was a lie. "I need more," Sarah said. "I need to know if anyone else is involved, if he is planning anything else." Kat hesitated. "Sarah, there is something else. I have been following him for the past 2 days. Yesterday, he met with his sister." Sarah looked up sharply. Melissa Whitmore, John's older sister. 41 years old, a successful divorce attorney. Sarah had always gotten along with her. Not close, but friendly. Family dinners, Christmas together. "They met at a restaurant in Menlo Park," Kat said. She pulled out a small recording device. "I got audio. California is a one-party consent state, and they were in a public place. You can listen to this." Kat pressed play. Melissa's voice came through clearly. "You need to be more careful. Sarah is not stupid. John, she is too busy with her company to notice. I have been doing this for months. Melissa, what is your exit strategy? John, once Amber is ready, I file. Community property means I get half of everything. Melissa, including the house? John, especially the house. It is worth $8 million now. Melissa, and I will represent you. We will destroy her in court. She works 80 hours a week. We claim abandonment. Sarah felt tears running down her face. She had not even known she was crying. John's own sister was helping him, planning it, strategizing how to take everything Sarah had built. Kat turned off the recording. I am sorry. Can I trust anyone? Sarah whispered. Kat reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You can trust me, and you can trust yourself. You are stronger than they know. Sarah wiped her eyes. She placed her hand on her stomach, where her baby was growing. 10 weeks now, her secret, her reason to fight. I want to know the full extent of it, Sarah said. Every lie, every betrayal, every dollar he has stolen. She looked up at Kat with steel in her eyes. And then I want to destroy him so completely he will wish he had never met me. Sarah sat in the conference room of Bradford and Associates, the top law firm in Silicon Valley. Thomas Bradford was 62 years old with its silver hair and the calm demeanor of someone who had seen everything. He had represented Sarah in all her corporate matters for the past 5 years. She trusted him with her business. Now she needed to trust him with her life. Show me the prenuptial agreement, Sarah said. Thomas pulled up the document on his laptop and turned it to face her. You insisted on this before you married John 6 years ago. He fought it at first, but eventually signed. Sarah remembered that fight. John had been hurt, said it meant she did not trust him, but Sarah had already built her company by then, already had patents, intellectual property, investors. She was not going to risk it all on romance. Thank God she had listened to her gut. Walk me through it, she said. Thomas highlighted the key sections. Assets brought into the marriage remain separate property. That includes your company, which you founded 2 years before you met John. Assets acquired during the marriage are community property unless held in a separate legal entity. And there is an infidelity clause. If either party commits adultery, they forfeit all spousal support. What about the house? Sarah asked. Thomas smiled slightly. Let me pull those documents. He opened another file. Catherine Grace Holdings, LLC, formed 4 years ago. You are the sole member and manager. When you purchased the land in Atherton, the deed was recorded in the LLC's name. When you built the house, all construction payments came from the LLC's corporate account. John's name appears nowhere on any document. Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. So he has no legal claim to the house. Zero, Thomas confirmed. It is corporate property of an LLC formed during your marriage, but you are the only member. California community property laws do not apply to properly structured LLCs. As long as you maintain proper corporate formalities, separate bank accounts, proper documentation, the house is entirely yours. I did everything by the book, Sarah said. Every payment documented, every decision recorded in corporate minutes. Then John has no claim, Thomas said, but I assume he thinks he does? Sarah pulled out her phone and showed him the screenshots of John's texts with Amber, the ones where he promised her the house, where he said California law meant he owned half. Thomas read them carefully. He is wrong, dangerously wrong, but the fact that he believes this gives us an opportunity. What do you mean? What if you could get him to bring his mistress to the house? That would be criminal trespassing on corporate property, and it would prove infidelity beyond any doubt. Sarah thought about it. She was 11 weeks pregnant now. Morning sickness hit her every day around 10 in the morning. She was exhausted, emotional, barely holding it together. But she needed to see this through, for herself, for her baby. How would I do that? She asked. Thomas leaned back in his chair. Give him an opportunity he cannot resist. Make him think you will be gone long enough that he can get away with it. 1 week later, Sarah announced at dinner that she had to fly to Singapore for emergency business meetings. The Asia-Pacific expansion is falling apart, she told John across the dining room table. I have to go fix it personally. It will take at least 10 days. She watched his face carefully. For just a moment, his eyes lit up. Then he smoothed his expression into concern. 10 days? Are you sure you should travel? You have been feeling sick lately. Just a stomach bug, Sarah lied. She was 12 weeks pregnant now. The nausea was from morning sickness, not any bug. I will be fine. I will miss you so much, John said. He reached across the table and took her hand. But I understand. Business first. Sarah looked at his hand holding hers. She used to love these hands. Now she knew they had touched another woman, had stolen from her company, had planned her destruction. I love you, she said, because she needed him to believe nothing had changed. I love you too, he replied. Both of them lying, both of them performing, but only Sarah knew they were both acting. The next morning, John drove her to San Francisco International Airport. He kissed her goodbye at departures, told her to text when she landed, told her he would be here waiting when she got back. Sarah walked into the terminal with her suitcase. John drove away, and then Sarah turned around, walked back out, and got into Kat's car in the parking garage. Ready? Kat asked. Ready, Sarah confirmed. They drove to the Four Seasons in Palo Alto, 20 minutes from Sarah's house. Sarah checked into a suite under a fake name. Kat had spent the past week installing hidden cameras throughout the mansion. Smoke detectors, air vents, picture frames, clock radios, 12 different angles covering every major room. You legally own the house through your LLC, Kat reminded her. You have every right to install security cameras in your own corporate property. Sarah's laptop was already set up in the hotel suite, showing all 12 camera feeds, audio and video, everything recording to encrypted cloud storage. Now they waited. Sarah was supposed to be on a 15-hour flight to Singapore. In reality, she was sitting in a hotel room, watching live feeds of her empty house, feeling her baby move inside her for the first time. Tiny flutters. The doctor had said she might start feeling movement around 12 weeks. Hey there, little one, she whispered, hand on her stomach. Kat looked over. Are you okay? No, Sarah said honestly, but I will be. Her phone buzzed. Text from John. Miss you already. House feels so empty without you. Another text came through immediately, but this one Kat's surveillance software intercepted. It was John texting Amber. She is gone for 10 days. Pack a bag. You are moving in with me. Let us see how it feels. Amber's reply, really? Like stay in the mansion? John, it is our house. Might as well get used to it. Sarah watched the messages appear on Kat's monitoring screen. Her jaw clenched. Here we go, Kat said softly. Day 2 of Sarah's supposed trip to Singapore. On the laptop screen, Sarah watched John's Porsche pull up to the front gate. Amber was in the passenger seat, phone already out, filming everything. The gate opened. John had the code, of course, he lived there. Or thought he did. They drove up the long driveway to the house. Sarah had designed this driveway herself 3 years ago, lined with oak trees, circular drive around a fountain. She had been so proud of it. Now she watched her husband park and help his mistress out of the car. Amber was even prettier in person than in photos. 24 years old, blonde, wearing clothes Sarah recognized from the Tiffany charges. That necklace had cost $14,000. Oh my God, you guys, look at this place. Amber was filming an Instagram story on her phone. Bye-bye. Surprise staycation at my booze mansion. Sarah felt sick, not morning sickness this time. Just pure nausea at watching this woman, this child, broadcast from Sarah's home to 47,000 followers. Kat was already taking screenshots. This is good, time-stamped, geotagged. She is creating our evidence for us. John unlocked the front door and gave Amber the full tour. Sarah watched on multiple camera feeds as they walked through her house. This is the living room, John said. That is a Steinway grand piano, $120,000. Oh my God, Amber breathed. And this is all yours? Half mine, John said. Community property. Once the divorce is final, I will buy her out. They moved to the wine cellar. Sarah gripped the arms of her chair. That was her father's wine collection. Her father had died 2 years ago. Those wines were one of the few things she had left of him. These bottles are worth thousands, John said. Some are over 10,000 each. Let us open one, Amber squealed. We are celebrating. Sarah watched in horror as John selected a bottle. 1982 Chateau Petrus, $12,000, her father's birth year. She had been saving it for a special occasion, for when her daughter turned 18, for a moment that mattered. John opened it like it was cheap grocery store wine. They drank it in the living room, Amber filming more Instagram stories. Sarah's employees followed Amber's account. Within an hour, screenshots were circulating. Sarah started getting texts. "Sarah, I do not know if you have seen this, but..." Sarah stared at her phone. This woman was posting publicly from Sarah's house. While Sarah was supposedly in Singapore, while Sarah was 12 weeks pregnant with John's child, hiding in a hotel room, watching her marriage implode. "I am going home," Sarah said. "Now." Kat grabbed her arm. "Sarah, wait. Your blood pressure, the baby." "I do not care," Sarah said. "I am going home." But Kat was right. Sarah forced herself to breathe, forced herself to wait, because she needed to see all of it. She needed John to incriminate himself completely. So she watched as they moved him upstairs to the master bedroom. The master bedroom Sarah had designed herself, 1,200 square feet, sitting area with fireplace, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the garden. A bed she had custom-made, California King, handcrafted walnut frame, sheets that cost $800. The bed where she had slept next to John for 3 years, believing in their marriage. Amber jumped on it like a child. "This bed is huge. Is this where you..." "Not anymore," John interrupted. "Sarah works so late she usually falls asleep in her office." He was lying. They had made love in this bed 3 nights before Sarah left for Singapore. John had told her he loved her, had kissed her neck, her shoulders, her stomach where their baby was growing, though he did not know it yet. All lies. "Show me the closet," Amber demanded. Sarah's walk-in closet was actually 2 rooms, climate-controlled, organized by color and season. She had worked hard for these clothes. Every Chanel suit represented deals she had closed. Every pair of Louboutins represented board meetings where she had been the only woman in the room. Amber started pulling things off hangers. "Too boring," she said, tossing a Tom Ford blazer on the floor. "Too corporate." A Donna Karan sheath dress joined it. Then she found the Valentino gown, deep red silk, $8,000. Sarah had worn it to a gala last year, the night Whitmore Analytics had won Tech Company of the Year. "Oh my God, this is gorgeous!" Amber held it up to herself in the mirror. Then she started stripping. Sarah watched on the camera feed as this woman, this stranger, took off her clothes in Sarah's closet. As John watched her, as Amber pulled on Sarah's $8,000 dress. "Zip me up," Amber said. John stepped behind her. Sarah could see his face on the camera. He was smiling. He zipped up the dress, his fingers lingering on Amber's bare back. Then he kissed her neck. Amber turned around. They kissed deeply, John's hands on the red silk, pulling Amber closer. Sarah knew what was coming next. She could look away, she could turn off the feed, but she needed to see it. She needed to know exactly what her husband was capable of. They had sex right there in Sarah's closet. Amber still wearing the Valentino gown, John pulling it up around her waist. Neither of them caring that these were Sarah's things, Sarah's space, Sarah's life they were violating. Kat muted the audio. "Sarah, you do not have to watch this." But Sarah could not look away, because this was the truth. This was who John really was, not the man who had promised to love her forever, not the father of her child, this stranger who would destroy everything they had built for a 24-year-old girl and her father's wine. When it was over, they went to the master bedroom. John lit candles, Sarah's favorite diptyque candles, $75 each. They got into bed, Sarah and John's bed. They had sex again. This time slower, more comfortable, like they belonged there. Afterward, Amber curled into John's side. "I could get used to this lifestyle." "You will," John said, stroking her hair. "This is our future." "When are you filing for divorce?" Amber asked. "After her next funding round. She is trying to raise $200 million. Once that closes and the stock options vest, I file." "How much will you get?" John laughed. "My sister Melissa says I could get $50 million in the settlement. Half the house, half her stock, spousal support. She owes me." $50 million? Amber sat up, eyes wide. "Oh my God, baby." "I gave up my career for her," John said. His voice had an edge to it now. Bitterness. "She owes me everything." Sarah felt something inside her break. Not her heart, that had broken weeks ago, something deeper, some fundamental belief she'd had about the world, about love, about trust. He gave up his career for her. He had lost his job at the hedge fund 4 years ago for insider trading. He would have gone to prison if Sarah had not paid his $650,000 SEC settlement. She had saved him, supported him for 4 years while he found himself, told him she believed in him. And this was how he repaid her. Sarah's hand moved to her stomach. 13 weeks pregnant now. Her baby could hear sounds now, the book said. Could she feel her mother's heartbreak? Did she know her father was a monster? Sarah, Kat's voice was gentle. We have enough. More than enough. He is on camera committing adultery, trespassing, discussing fraud. The attorney will have a field day with this. I know, Sarah whispered. You should wait until morning. Go in when you are calm. I am calm, Sarah said. She was not calm. She was shaking with rage, but she was also done watching. Done waiting, done hiding. This was her house, her life, her baby growing inside her, and she was going home. It was 11 at night when Sarah parked her car down the street from her own mansion. She could see lights on in the master bedroom. The bedroom cameras showed John and Amber asleep, naked, tangled in Sarah's sheets. Sarah used her phone app to check the other cameras. Empty wine bottles in the living room. 3 more of her father's all collection gone. Designer clothes scattered across her closet floor. The Valentino gown crumpled in a corner. Ruined. She could call the police right now. Have them both arrested for trespassing. But that would not hurt enough. That would not make John understand what he had destroyed. Sarah wanted to see his face when his world fell apart, the way hers had 3 weeks ago when she found those messages. She walked up to her front door. John did not know it had biometric entry, fingerprint scanner hidden in the decorative panel. He thought he had the only keys. The door unlocked silently. Sarah stepped into her house. She walked through the foyer, past the Steinway piano John had bragged about, past the living room where they had drunk her father's wine, past her destroyed closet. She stood in the doorway of the master bedroom and turned on all the lights. Amber screamed. John jolted awake, disoriented, eyes squinting against the sudden brightness. What? Sarah? You were supposed to be in Singapore. Sarah's voice was ice. I was, but then I saw Amber's Instagram story from my house. She held up her phone, showing Amber's post. Surprise staycation at my booze mansion. 47,000 people saw it, including several of my employees. John was scrambling for his clothes, trying to cover himself. Amber grabbed the sheet, pulling it up to her chin, her face pale. Sarah, I can't explain, John started. Can you? Sarah walked into the room. She was wearing the business suit she had put on that morning for her fake flight. Heels, professional, in control. Please, explain to me when there is another woman in our bed. I did not know. Amber's voice was small, frightened. You did not know he was married? Sarah turned to her. You have been sleeping with him for 5 months. You knew. Sarah pulled out her phone and started reading from the screenshots. Last night was amazing, baby. When are you leaving her? You promised we would be together. When are you filing for divorce? How much will you get in the settlement? Amber's face went from pale to red. John found his voice, found his defense. You are never here. You care more about your company than our marriage. So you brought her to my house? Sarah's control was slipping. She could feel it. You brought your mistress to the home I built? Our house. John was getting angry now, feeling cornered. This is community property. I have every right to be here. Sarah had been waiting for this. She pulled up the documents on her phone, the ones Thomas had showed her. Read it, out loud. She shoved the phone at him. John squinted at the screen. Property of Catherine Grace Holdings, LLC. So what? That is your company. It is my company, Sarah corrected. Catherine Grace Holdings, my middle name, my grandmother's name, formed 4 years ago. She let that sink in. I am the sole member. You are not on the LLC. You are not on the deed. You are not on any document related to this house. John's face went pale. That is not possible. This is our house. We live here together. I live here, Sarah said. You have been a guest, an unpaid guest in my corporate property. But California law, community property, does not apply to properly structured LLCs, Sarah finished. Ask your lawyer's sister. Oh, wait, you cannot ask her for help anymore, can you? She pulled out her phone again and played the audio recording Kat had made. John and Melissa's voices filled the bedroom. We will destroy her in court. Claim abandonment. Once I file, community property means I get half of everything. I will represent you. She works 80 hours a week. John's face drained of all color. How did you? I know everything, John. Every lie, every theft, every plan. Boss Amber was looking between them, finally understanding. Wait, you do not own this house? I thought I did, John stammered. This is, Sarah, this is fraud. Fraud? Sarah laughed, sharp and bitter. You forged corporate documents to steal $167,000 from my company. You want to talk about fraud? She pulled up the credit card statements on her phone. Venice Beach apartment, $25,000. Tiffany jewelry, $31,000. Hotels, $18,000. All embezzled from Whitmore Analytics. That is a felony, John. Amber was staring at John now, her expression shifting from fear to anger. You told me you were rich. You said you had money. I will, John said desperately. After the divorce, there is no divorce money. Amber's voice rose. You are broke. You are a loser living off your wife. She threw back the covers and started grabbing her clothes from the floor. I cannot believe I wasted 5 months on you. Amber, wait. John reached for her. Do not touch me. She was pulling on her dress, the one she had arrived in, not Sarah's ruined Valentino. You lied to me about everything. Sarah watched dispassionately. Amber, you have 5 minutes to leave my property before I call the police for trespassing. You cannot. This is corporate property. You are not an authorized guest. That is criminal trespassing in California. And I have you on camera breaking into my closet, destroying my property, and having sex in my house without permission. Amber ran. She grabbed her purse, her phone, and ran out of the bedroom, still pulling on her shoes. Sarah heard the front door slam a moment later. Then it was just Sarah and John. John sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. Sarah, please, I made a mistake. I will end it with her. We can fix this. Fix this? Sarah's voice shook. You brought your mistress into our home, into our bed. You drank my father's wine. You destroyed my mother's dress. You planned to steal my company. I was angry. John looked up at her. You are never here. You do not appreciate what I gave up for you. What you gave up? Sarah felt years of swallowed resentment rising. You lost your job for insider trading. You would have gone to prison if I had not paid your settlement. $650,000, John. I saved you. And you never let me forget it. John stood up, finally showing his true face. Everything is yours. Your company, your money, your house. Do you know what it is like being Mr. Sarah Whitmore? Everyone knows I am here because of your success. So you decided to steal from me? To plan to take half of everything I built? I deserve it. John's voice was raw now. I gave up my career for you. You lost your career because you broke the law. They stood facing each other across the bed where they had slept together for 3 years, where Sarah had believed in their future, where she had hoped to someday tell their children's bedtime stories. That future was dead now. Sarah reached into her purse. Her hand closed around the pregnancy test she had been carrying for 3 weeks. She pulled it out and set it on the nightstand. John stared at it. What is that? I am pregnant, Sarah said. 13 weeks. The words hung in the air between them. John's entire demeanor changed. His face softened. He took a step toward her. You are pregnant? Sarah, that is wonderful. We are having a baby. He reached for her. Sarah stepped back. Do not touch me. But we are having a baby. Sarah, this changes everything. We can work through this. For the baby, this changes nothing, Sarah said. Her voice was hard. Except now you are not just betraying me. You are betraying our child. Sarah, please. I found out the same day I found out about her. Sarah felt her control finally breaking. Her voice cracked. I found out I was pregnant, and I was going to tell you that night. I had reservations at your favorite restaurant. I bought baby shoes to put in a gift box. I was scared but excited. Tears were running down her face now. She did not try to stop them. Instead, I found your phone. I found the messages. I found out you have been planning this for months. Planning to leave me, to take half my company, to destroy everything I built. I am sorry, John said. He looked like he might cry too. I am so sorry. I will change. I promise, for the baby. For 3 months, I have been pregnant and alone, Sarah said. For 3 months, I have known my marriage was a lie. I have watched you on hidden cameras bringing her here. I have heard you plan to steal my company. I have listened to your sister help you strategize. She placed her hand on her stomach. And every single day, I have felt our baby growing inside me, knowing that her father is a liar and a thief. I will change. Get out of my house, Sarah said, now. Sarah, she pressed a button on her phone. The front gate opened. 2 security guards walked up the driveway. Former police officers Kat had hired for this exact moment. They entered the bedroom. Ms. Whitmore, we are here to assist. You cannot kick me out, John's voice rose. I live here. This is my home. The first security guard, a man in his 50s with a calm, professional demeanor, addressed John. Sir, do you have documentation proving residency or ownership? I am her husband. We have lived here for 3 years. Do you pay rent? Are you on the lease or deed? John had nothing. Sir, you need to leave the premises. Where am I supposed to go? John turned to Sarah, desperate now. That is not my problem, Sarah said. You have your Porsche, the one I bought you for your birthday last year, $110,000. My clothes, my things, will be packed and sent to wherever you land. But you are not spending another night in my house. The security guards escorted John out. He was wearing just the jeans and t-shirt he had put on, no shoes, no jacket. Down the grand staircase Sarah had designed, through the foyer with the Steinway piano, out the front door into the cold November night. Sarah watched from the master bedroom window as John sat in his Porsche in the driveway. He looked up at the house, at all the lights burning, at Sarah standing in the window. Then the gates opened and closed behind him. He drove away with nowhere to go. Sarah stood alone in the house. She walked to the bed, saw the tangled sheets, and felt bile rise in her throat. She stripped the bed completely, carried everything to the laundry room, and threw it all away. The sheets, the duvet, the pillows, all of it ruined. Then she went back upstairs to the guest room, curled up on the bed there, placed both hands on her stomach, and whispered, "It is just you and me now, baby girl." And for the first time in 3 months, Sarah let herself cry, really cry, for the marriage she thought she had, for the future she had imagined, for the family that would never be. She cried until there was nothing left, until she was empty, and then she slept. Sarah woke up with swollen eyes and a pounding headache. For a moment, she forgot everything. Then it all came rushing back. John, Amber, the confrontation, the pregnancy. She was 13 weeks pregnant and alone. Sarah forced herself to shower, to dress, to go to work. She had a company to run, 800 employees depending on her, investors counting on her. She could not fall apart. But when she walked into Whitmore Analytics that morning, everyone knew. News traveled fast in Silicon Valley. Amber's Instagram posts had been screenshot and shared. People knew John had been kicked out. People were whispering. Sarah held her head high and went to her office. At 2 in the afternoon, 2 Atherton police officers showed up. Her assistant looked panicked. "Sarah, the police are here." Every employee in the open office space was staring. Sarah could feel their eyes on her as she walked to the conference room where the officers waited. "Mr. Whitmore, your husband filed a report claiming you illegally locked him out of his marital home." Sarah took a breath. "Officers, may I show you something?" She pulled up the property records on her computer. The deed showing Catherine Grace Holdings, LLC. The incorporation documents showing her as sole member. The complete absence of John's name anywhere. The older officer studied the documents. "Ma'am, this is a civil matter, not criminal. He will need to take it to family court." But the damage was done. Everyone in her company had seen the police come to her office. Everyone knew her personal life was imploding. After the officers left, Sarah sat in her office with the door closed. She placed her hand on her stomach. The baby was the size of a lemon now, the book said, developing fingerprints, learning to swallow. Sarah had not even had time to be excited about any of it. She had been too busy fighting to protect them both. Her phone rang. Thomas Bradford. John has hired an attorney, Thomas said without preamble. Robert Hastings, aggressive divorce lawyer. Not cheap. John must have used the last of the joint credit card for the retainer. What does he want? Access to the house. He is claiming beneficial ownership interest under California Family Code 753. Even though the house is in an LLC, he argues that he has been living there for 3 years and has marital interest. Sarah felt sick. Can he do that? He is trying. We have an emergency hearing tomorrow morning in front of Judge Patricia Morrison. Wear something conservative. Look sympathetic. And Sarah, yes? Do not tell the judge you are pregnant. Not yet. It could complicate things. Sarah hung up and placed both hands on her stomach. I am sorry, baby. Mommy has to keep you a secret a little longer. The emergency hearing was held in a wood-paneled courtroom in Redwood City. Judge Patricia Morrison was 62, gray hair pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose. John sat at the plaintiff's table with Robert Hastings, a sharp-suited man in his late 50s. John had cleaned up, wearing a suit Sarah recognized, one she had bought him, playing the part of the wronged husband. Sarah sat with Thomas, wearing a navy suit, no jewelry except her wedding ring. She had not taken it off yet, did not know if she should. Mr. Hastings, your client's motion, Judge Morrison said. Hastings stood. Your Honor, my client has been married to Ms. Whitmore for 6 years. They have lived together in the Atherton property for 3 years. He has established residency. He has maintained the property, contributed to the household. And 3 days ago, his wife changed the locks and had him forcibly removed by security guards. He has nowhere to go. He is effectively homeless. The judge looked at Sarah. Ms. Whitmore? Thomas stood. Your Honor, the property in question is owned by Catherine Grace Holdings, LLC, a corporate entity of which Ms. Whitmore is the sole member. Mr. Whitmore has never been a member of the LLC. His name does not appear on the deed. He has never paid rent or had a lease agreement. He is not an owner. He is not a tenant. He has no legal claim to the property. He is her husband, Hastings shot back. This is a marital residence. California is a community property state. Thomas slid documents across to the judge. The LLC was properly formed during the marriage with full corporate formalities, separate bank accounts, documented decisions, corporate minutes. Community property laws do not apply to properly structured, separate entities. Judge Morrison reviewed the documents for a long moment. Sarah held her breath. This is complex, the judge finally said. I am not making a final determination today. Sarah's heart sank. However, the judge continued, Mr. Whitmore has established that he has been living in the residence for 3 years. I cannot simply allow him to be rendered homeless while we sort out the legal technicalities. Your Honor, Thomas started. The judge held up a hand. Pending trial, I am granting Mr. Whitmore limited access to the property. He may return to the residence, but he and Ms. Whitmore must maintain separate bedrooms. This is temporary until we determine property rights. Trial is set for 6 weeks from today. Sarah felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. 6 weeks, living with John, while pregnant, while knowing he had betrayed her. You are married, the judge said, looking directly at Sarah. You will have to work it out. That night, John returned to the house. Sarah had changed all the locks after kicking him out, but per the court order, she had to give him a key. He took the guest suite at the opposite end of the house, the same suite where he had first had sex with Amber on camera. Thomas had drawn up a written agreement based on the judge's order. John got the guest suite and guest bathroom. No access to the master suite, Sarah's office, or the wine cellar. No guests without Sarah's written permission. He had to notify Sarah of his comings and goings. John signed it with a smirk on his face. Within 48 hours, he violated every single rule. Sarah came home from work to find Amber's car in the driveway. Her stomach dropped. She walked into her own house to find them in the kitchen, cooking dinner like they were a couple, like this was their home. Get her out, Sarah said. Her voice was shaking. Now. John looked up from the stove. Judge said I could have guests in common areas. Kitchen is common. The agreement says no guests without my permission. Sue me, John said. Oh, wait, you already are. Amber turned from the counter, a glass of wine in her mouth and Sarah's wine from Sarah's wine fridge. Hi, Sarah. John was just showing me how to use the Viking range. Sarah looked at this 24-year-old girl who had helped destroy her marriage. You need to leave. Actually, I do not think I do, Amber said. She took a sip of wine. John lives here. He can have guests. The court order is just a piece of paper, John interrupted. What are you going to do, Sarah? Call the police? They were already here once this week. You want to humiliate yourself again in front of your employees? Sarah felt tears of rage and frustration burning behind her eyes, but she would not cry, not in front of them. She turned and walked upstairs to her office. She called Thomas. He is already violating the order, she said. He has Amber here, in my house. Document it, Thomas said. Take photos, videos, keep a log, every violation. We will use it at trial in 6 weeks. 6 weeks? Sarah's voice broke. Thomas, I cannot do this for 6 weeks. You can. You are the strongest person I know. Just hold on. But Sarah did not feel strong. She felt exhausted. She was 14 weeks pregnant. Her morning sickness was terrible. She was not sleeping. Her blood pressure was climbing. And now she had to live in the same house as the man who had destroyed her life. She heard laughter from downstairs. John and Amber, comfortable in her kitchen, drinking her wine, acting like they owned the place. Sarah locked her office door and curled up on the small couch she kept for late-night work sessions. She placed her hand on her stomach. I am so sorry, baby, she whispered. Mommy is trying her best. The next morning, Sarah woke up to the smell of coffee and pancakes. She walked downstairs to find Amber still there, wearing one of Sarah's silk robes, making breakfast in Sarah's kitchen. Morning, Amber said cheerfully. Want some pancakes? Sarah wanted to scream. Instead, she took a photo with her phone. Amber in Sarah's robe, in Sarah's house, the morning after clearly spending the night. I thought you had to leave, Sarah said. John said I could stay over, Amber replied. The guest suite is huge. Plenty of room for both of us. John walked in, freshly showered. Morning, Sarah. Sleep well? Sarah looked at him, at the man she had married, the man who had promised to love and cherish her, the father of her unborn child. He looked happy, triumphant even, like he was winning. I have to go to work, Sarah said. Have a good day, Amber called after her. Sarah drove to her office with tears streaming down her face. She made it to the parking garage before she had to pull over and vomit. Morning sickness, stress, heartbreak, all of it too much. She sat in her car, forehead against the steering wheel, and wondered how much more she could take. Her phone buzzed, her OB's office, reminding her of her 15-week appointment tomorrow. Sarah placed her hand on her stomach. The baby was the size of an apple now, could hear sounds, could sense light. Was her baby stressed too? Could babies feel their mother's heartbreak? I will fix this, Sarah promised. I swear I will fix this. But she had no idea how. Week 2 of living with John was worse than the first. He brought Amber over 3, sometimes 4 times a week. They would sit in Sarah's living room, watching her television, drinking her wine. John made financial demands. He needed access to money. He had bills to pay. Get a job, Sarah said. I am too emotionally distressed to work, John replied. This situation is taking a toll on my mental health. Sarah wanted to laugh. His mental health. He was not the one 13 weeks pregnant, living with the husband who had betrayed her, trying to run a billion-dollar company while fighting morning sickness and insomnia. Her 15-week OB appointment brought bad news. Your blood pressure is elevated, Dr. Parker said, frowning at the numbers. 140/90. Are you under stress? You could say that, Sarah said. Sarah, you need to reduce your stress levels. High blood pressure in pregnancy can lead to complications. Preeclampsia, premature birth, placental problems. I am trying, Sarah said, but I am in the middle of a divorce. We are living together by court order. Dr. Parker looked concerned. Can you stay somewhere else? With family? A friend? The judge said we have to live in the house together for 6 weeks until trial. Then you need to find ways to manage your stress, meditation, yoga, therapy, and I want to see you back in 1 week to check your blood pressure again. As Sarah left the appointment feeling even more anxious. Stress was bad for the baby. But how could she eliminate stress when the source of it was court-ordered to live in her house? That Saturday morning, Sarah was in her home office trying to work. She heard voices upstairs. John was giving Amber another tour of the house. Can I see the master bedroom? Amber's voice carried down the hall. Judge says I cannot go in there, John replied. But I can, right? I am your guest. Sarah's office door was ajar. She heard footsteps in the hallway, then her bedroom door opening. Sarah ran upstairs. Amber was standing in her bedroom, looking around like she owned it. She had opened Sarah's closet and was looking through the clothes again. Get out, Sarah said. Her voice was shaking with rage. Now. Relax, Amber said. She pulled out a Chanel jacket. You have such nice things. Shame you do not appreciate them. Get out of my room. Or what? Amber turned to face her. You will call the cops? They cannot do anything. John lives here. I am his guest. Sarah moved toward her. She felt dizzy, her vision blurring. I said get out. John appeared in the doorway. Sarah, calm down. You are getting worked up over nothing. Over nothing? Sarah's voice rose. She is in my bedroom, going through my things. Sarah, you need to calm down. Do not tell me to calm down, Sarah shouted, and then the room tilted. Sharp pain in her abdomen, cramping. She grabbed the door frame, but her legs would not hold her. She collapsed. Sarah came to in the back of an ambulance. EMT hovering over her, blood pressure cuff on her arm. John was there, looking genuinely concerned for the first time in weeks. You are going to be okay, the EMT said. We are taking you to Stanford Hospital. You are pregnant, correct? 15 weeks, Sarah managed to say. Any bleeding? Sarah looked down. There was blood on her white pants. Not a lot, but enough. Yes, she whispered. The EMT squeezed her hand. The hospital will take care of you. Sarah wanted to ask about the baby but could not make her voice work. All she could think was, please do not let me lose this baby. Please. This baby is all I have left. At the hospital, they rushed her into the ER. Ultrasound machine brought in immediately. Cold gel on her stomach. The technician moving the wand, searching. Silence. Long, terrible silence. Then a heartbeat, fast and strong. Sarah sobbed with relief. Baby is okay, the technician said, smiling. Strong heartbeat. Good position. Dr. Parker appeared in the ER, called in by the hospital. She reviewed the ultrasound, examined Sarah, read through the tests. You have a subchorionic hematoma, she explained. It is a collection of blood between the uterine wall and the placenta. It can cause bleeding and cramping. Is the baby okay? Sarah asked. Right now, yes, but this is serious, Sarah. The hematoma was caused by stress and elevated blood pressure. If it gets worse, you could miscarry. Sarah felt like she could not breathe. What do I do? Complete bed rest, no stress, none. Your blood pressure needs to come down or we could lose the baby. I cannot, Sarah said. I am in the middle of a divorce. I have to live with my husband by court order. I have a company to run. Then you need to make a choice, Dr. Parker said gently. Your baby or your pride. Because if you keep going like this, you will lose this pregnancy. You are only 15 weeks. The baby cannot survive on her own yet. Sarah had not even thought to ask. It is a girl? Dr. Parker smiled. Did you want to know? I am sorry, I assumed. It is okay, Sarah said. Tears were running down her face again. A girl. She placed her hand on her stomach. A daughter. She was having a daughter. And she was going to lose her if she did not fix this. John was in the waiting room when Sarah was released 3 hours later. He drove her home in silence, helped her into the house, up the stairs to her bedroom. I am sorry, he said. I did not know you were pregnant. Why did you not tell me? Because I found out the same day I found out about her, Sarah said, and I knew you would use it against me. John looked stricken. I would never. You stole from me, John. You planned to take my company. You brought your mistress to my house while I was pregnant with your child. Do not tell me what you would never do." He left her alone then. Sarah lay in bed, hand on her stomach, thinking about the choice Dr. Parker had given her baby or her pride. It was not even a choice. The next morning, Sarah called Thomas from her bed. "File an emergency motion. Medical necessity. Get him out of my house or I am going to lose this baby." 2 weeks later, Sarah appeared at the emergency hearing via video conference. Parker had forbidden her to leave the house. She was on strict bed rest, had been bleeding on and off for 14 days, was surviving on crackers and ginger tea, because morning sickness had gotten worse. She looked terrible and she knew it. Pale, exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. But maybe that would help. Maybe the judge would see what this was doing to her. Judge Morrison's face appeared on the screen. "Miss Whitmore, how are you feeling?" "Not well, Your Honor," Sarah said honestly. Thomas presented the medical records. Dr. Parker's report, the diagnosis of subchorionic hematoma, the bleeding, the elevated blood pressure, the risk of miscarriage. "Your Honor, my client is 16 weeks pregnant and at serious risk of losing her baby due to the stress of living with her estranged husband who committed adultery." John's attorney Hastings stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Whitmore has nowhere else to go. He has been financially dependent on his wife for years. He has no resources because he stole $167,000 from her company and spent it on his mistress," Thomas interrupted. "And he is not financially dependent. He chose not to work." "Your Honor," Hastings tried to continue, but Judge Morrison held up her hand. She was reading through the medical reports, frowning. "Ms. Whitmore, is it true you have been bleeding for 2 weeks?" "Yes, Your Honor," Sarah said. "And your doctor believes this is due to stress from living with your husband?" "Yes, Your Honor. She says if I do not eliminate the stress, I will miscarry." The judge looked at John, who was sitting at the plaintiff's table looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Hastings, does your client have any family he can stay with?" "His sister, but they have had a falling out." "Related to the fact that she was helping him plan to defraud his wife?" Hastings went silent. Judge Morrison turned to the screen. "Miss Whitmore, I reviewed the evidence your attorney submitted. The credit card fraud, the videos of Mr. Whitmore bringing his paramour to the property, the recordings of him conspiring with his sister." She removed her reading glasses. "I have to say, I have seen a lot of divorce cases in 30 years on the bench, but this level of betrayal while his wife is pregnant is particularly egregious." She turned back to John. "Mr. Whitmore, stand up." John stood, looking nervous for the first time. "You knowingly committed fraud against your wife's company. You violated the terms of your prenuptial agreement. You endangered her pregnancy by creating an untenable living situation. And then you violated my temporary order by bringing your mistress back to the property multiple times. Your Honor, I can't explain. I am not interested in explanations. I am granting Ms. Whitmore's emergency motion. You are hereby ordered to vacate the property within 24 hours. You are prohibited from contacting Ms. Whitmore except through attorneys. Your Honor, I have nowhere to go. You should have thought of that before you stole from your pregnant wife," Judge Morrison said coldly. "I am also referring the embezzlement matter to the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. This hearing is adjourned." The screen went black. Sarah sat in her bed, hand over her mouth, hardly believing it was over. Thomas's face appeared on her laptop screen. "Sarah, are you okay?" "He has to leave?" Sarah asked. "Within 24 hours. It is over. He is out." Sarah started crying. Relief, exhaustion, hormones, everything hit at once. "Thank you," she managed to say. "Rest," Thomas said gently. "Take care of yourself and that baby. I will handle everything from here." Sarah closed her laptop and lay back against her pillows. She placed both hands on her stomach where her daughter was growing. 17 weeks now, the size of a turnip, developing taste buds, learning to suck her thumb. "We did it, baby girl," Sarah whispered. "We won." John moved out that day. He threw clothes into suitcases, loaded up his Porsche, and left without saying goodbye. He went to his sister Melissa's house first, but she refused to let him stay. She was being investigated by the state bar for her role in the conspiracy. Her own marriage was falling apart. She told John he had made his bed, and now he had to lie in it. He ended up at a motel in East Palo Alto, paying by the week with what was left on the joint credit card. The Santa Clara County DA filed criminal charges: grand theft, fraud, forgery. John was facing 3 to 7 years in prison. Amber disappeared completely. She blocked John's number, deleted all her Instagram posts featuring him, and posted a new photo with a different man 2 weeks later. New beginning, the caption read. When John tried to call her from the motel, he got a message. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. The divorce proceedings went quickly. John could not afford a lawyer. His court-appointed attorney advised him to settle. The prenuptial agreement held. The infidelity clause was enforced. John got nothing. No property, no spousal support, no share of Sarah's company. Everything stayed with Sarah. His parental rights were set at supervised visitation only, pending the outcome of the criminal trial. John signed the papers in a courthouse hallway, his hand shaking. Sarah was not there. She was still on bed rest. Thomas handled everything. It was over. With John gone, Sarah's health improved. She stayed on bed rest for 4 more weeks. Slowly, the bleeding stopped. Her blood pressure came down. The hematoma began to resolve. At her 20-week ultrasound, Dr. Parker smiled. Everything looks perfect. The hematoma is almost completely gone. Blood pressure is normal. Baby is thriving. Sarah cried with relief. She is okay? She is more than okay. She is strong and healthy. You are out of the woods. Sarah looked at the screen showing her daughter. She could see her profile now. Her nose, her fingers, real and perfect. Do you have a name picked out? Dr. Parker asked. Grace, Sarah said. Grace Catherine Whitmore, after my grandmother. That is beautiful. Sarah went home that day feeling like she could breathe for the first time in months. She was 20 weeks pregnant, halfway there, and her daughter was safe. Over the next few months, Sarah slowly rebuilt her life. She worked from home, kept her hours reasonable. She started preparing a nursery, not in the Atherton mansion, which held too many bad memories, but in a new house. She sold the mansion 6 months after kicking John out, got $12 million for it, well over the $8 million it was worth when she built it. Too many bad memories to ever feel like home again. She bought a beautiful craftsman house in Palo Alto instead. 4,000 square feet, which felt small after the mansion but was more than enough. It had a yard with oak trees and a garden, room for a swing set. It felt like a real home. Sarah was 35 weeks pregnant when John's criminal trial concluded. He pleaded guilty to avoid a longer sentence. The judge sentenced him to 5 years in prison, but he would likely serve 3 with good behavior. Sarah did not attend the sentencing. She was too busy getting ready for her daughter's arrival. Grace Catherine Whitmore was born on May 15th at Stanford Hospital. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, 20 inches long, perfect. Sarah held her daughter for the first time and felt her broken heart begin to heal. This tiny person with her dark hair and curious eyes was worth everything. Worth the heartbreak, the betrayal, the stress, the fight. Hello, my love, Sarah whispered. I have been waiting for you. Grace yawned and curled her tiny fist around Sarah's finger. And Sarah knew in that moment that she had not lost everything. She had gained something far more valuable. The first year of Grace's life was the hardest and best year of Sarah's life. She was a single mother running $1 billion company. It should have been impossible, but Sarah had spent her entire career doing impossible things. She brought Grace to the office 3 days a week, set up a nursery in the corner of her office with a crib, a changing table, and toys. Her employees were surprisingly supportive. Several had young children themselves. They understood. The other 2 days, Sarah worked from home. She hired a nanny, a wonderful woman named Maria who treated Grace like her own granddaughter. But Sarah made sure she was there for everything. First smile, first laugh, first tooth, first word, which was mama, and made Sarah cry. She was exhausted all the time. Sleep deprived, overwhelmed, stretched too thin. But when she looked at Grace, none of it mattered. John sent letters from prison, 1 every month. Sarah kept them in a box, unopened. Maybe someday Grace would want to read them. Maybe she would want to know her father. But Sarah could not bring herself to open them. Not yet. Melissa tried to reach out once, about 8 months after Grace was born. She sent an email. I am sorry I chose my brother over what was right. I was wrong. Can we talk? Sarah deleted it without responding. Some betrayals did not deserve forgiveness. When Grace was 18 months old, Whitmore Analytics received an acquisition offer from Google, $2.3 billion. Sarah thought about it for 2 weeks, talked to her board, talked to her investors, talked to her financial advisor, and then she accepted. She was 36 years old. She had built a company from nothing and sold it for more money than she could spend in 10 lifetimes. She had proven everything she needed to prove. Now she wanted to spend time with her daughter. Sarah used part of the money to start the Catherine Grace Foundation, named after her grandmother and her daughter. It supported women in tech and survivors of domestic financial abuse. It provided legal assistance, financial counseling, and emergency funds for women trying to escape controlling partners. She worked from 9 to 3 every day, always home when Grace woke up from her nap, always there for dinner, bath time, bedtime stories. She dated briefly when Grace was 2, a nice man, a professor at Stanford, but it did not work out. Sarah was not ready. Maybe she would never be ready. I do not need a partner to be complete, and she told her therapist. I have Grace, I have my work, I have myself. That is enough. And it was. John was released from prison when Grace was 3 years old. He had served 3 years of his 5-year sentence with good behavior. Sarah heard about it through Thomas, who still handled her legal affairs. He wants visitation, Thomas said. He is entitled to it under the divorce agreement, supervised only, but he does have parental rights. Sarah felt sick. She had managed to keep John out of their lives for 3 years. Grace had no memory of him, no idea who he was. Does he have to? Sarah asked. Legally, yes, unless you can prove he is a danger to her, but his crime was financial, not violent. A judge will likely grant supervised visitation. Sarah hated it, but she also knew Grace deserved the chance to know her father. Even if he was a terrible person, even if he had destroyed their family, that was Grace's decision to make when she was old enough. The first visit was arranged at a supervised visitation center. Sarah brought Grace, who was confused about why they were there. Who is that man, Mommy? Grace asked, pointing at John through the window. That is your daddy, Sarah said gently. Grace frowned. I do not have a daddy. You do, sweetie. He just has not been around. Why not? How do you explain to a 3-year-old that her father stole from her mother and went to prison for it? He made some mistakes, Sarah said, but he wants to meet you. Grace was shy at first. John looked different, thinner, older, harder. Prison had changed him. He sat on the floor with Grace and her toys, trying to engage her. She warmed up eventually, showing him her favorite stuffed bunny. Sarah watched through the window, her heart breaking. Grace deserved better than this. She deserved a father who had been there from the beginning, who had held her as a newborn, walked with her at midnight when she could not sleep, celebrated her first steps. But this was what they had. The visits continued, once a month, supervised. John was living in San Jose now, working at Best Buy. He had applied to dozens of companies in his field, but no one would hire him with a felony conviction. He sent Grace birthday cards and Christmas presents. Small things. He clearly did not have much money. A stuffed animal, a coloring book. He was trying in his own limited way. Sarah did not forgive him. She probably never would. But she also did not want Grace to grow up feeling like she had been deprived of a father. That was not fair to Grace. So Sarah allowed the visits, kept them supervised, protected her daughter while giving her the chance to know John. It was the best Sarah could do. When Grace was 4, she started pre-K at a Montessori school in Palo Alto. She loved it. Came home every day chattering about her friends, her teachers, what she learned. She was smart, scary smart, already reading simple books, doing basic math, asking questions about everything. Why is the sky blue? Where do stars go in the daytime? How do airplanes fly? Sarah answered every question as best she could, bought children's science books, took Grace to museums, encouraged her curiosity. Grace looked like Sarah, dark hair, serious eyes, thoughtful expression. But she had John's charm, his easy way with people. She made friends effortlessly, could talk to anyone. Sarah watched her daughter navigate the world with a confidence Sarah had never had at that age, and felt proud. Grace was not growing up with the weight of her parents' broken marriage. She was happy, loved, secure. That was all Sarah had ever wanted. 5 years later, Sarah stood in her backyard in Palo Alto, watching 15 kindergartners run around for Grace's fifth birthday party. The Craftsman house she had bought 4 years ago finally felt like home. Real home, not just a place to live. Grace was in the center of the chaos, wearing a purple birthday dress and a tiara, laughing as her friends chased her around the swing set Sarah had installed last summer. "You did good, honey," Sarah's mother said, sitting beside her on the porch. Sarah's mother had flown in from Boston for the party. They had gotten closer since Grace was born. The baby had healed some old wounds between them. "I survived," Sarah said, "and I raised her." "You did more than survive. You thrived. Look at you, successful foundation, beautiful home, healthy, happy child. You should be proud." Sarah watched Grace blow dandelion seeds into the wind, making wishes. "Some days I am. Some days I just feel tired." "That is motherhood," her mother said, smiling, "but you are doing great." The party wound down around 4. Parents collected their children, taking home goodie bags and leftover cake. Grace hugged each friend goodbye, thanking them for coming to her party. When it was just Sarah and Grace, they sat on the back porch steps together. Grace climbed into Sarah's lap, tired from all the excitement. "Did you have fun?" Sarah asked. "The best," Grace said. "Mommy, can I ask you something?" "Of course, baby." "Why does Daddy live far away? Why does he not live with us?" Sarah's heart squeezed. They had this conversation periodically. Grace was old enough now to notice that other kids had 2 parents at home. "Daddy made some choices that hurt Mommy," Sarah said carefully. "So we do not live together anymore. But he loves you very much." "Do you love him?" Sarah paused. How honest should she be? Grace was only 5, but she also deserved truth, age-appropriate truth. "I used to," Sarah said. "When we first got married, I loved him very much. But sometimes people change, and sometimes love is not enough if there is not also respect and trust." Grace thought about this. "Do you think he will ever live with us again?" "No, sweetheart, he will not. But that is okay. Some families have 2 parents at home, and some have 1. We have each other, and Nana, and our friends. We have everything we need." "But you are sad sometimes," Grace said. "I see you crying when you think I am asleep." Children noticed everything. Sarah kissed the top of Grace's head. "Sometimes I am sad about things that happened before you were born. But you, my love, you make me happy every single day. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "Really? Really, truly?" Grace hugged her tighter. "I love you, Mommy. I love you too, baby girl." That night, after Grace was asleep, Sarah sat in her home office and opened her laptop. She did not do this often, look back at everything that had happened 5 years ago. But something about Grace's 5th birthday made her reflective. She pulled up old files, screenshots of John's messages with Amber, the video footage of them in the house, the court documents, the medical records from when she almost lost Grace. She should delete all of it, move on, let go. But something kept her from clicking delete. Maybe because it was proof. Proof that she had survived something that should have destroyed her. Proof that she had fought for herself and her daughter. Proof that she was stronger than she ever knew. People asked Sarah sometimes if she had won. If forcing John out of the house, taking everything in the divorce, having him sent to prison, if that was winning. Sarah always said the same thing: "I did not win, I survived." Because winning implied a game, a competition. This had never been about winning. It had been about survival, about protecting herself and her unborn child from someone who wanted to destroy them both. She had lost her marriage, lost her trust in people, lost the future she thought she had, nearly lost her daughter. But she had gained something more valuable than any of that. She had learned that love without respect is worthless, that success does not make you less deserving of loyalty, that sometimes the person you think you need is the person destroying you. And she had learned that a mother's love for her child is the strongest force on earth. Sarah had not fought for her company or her house or her money. She had fought for the right to raise her daughter in peace, for the right to give Grace a life free from manipulation and lies. And that was not winning. That was everything. The next morning was Saturday. Sarah woke to find Grace in her bed, cuddled up next to her. She must have come in during the night. "Good morning, birthday girl," Sarah whispered. Grace opened her eyes and smiled. "Is it still my birthday?" "Your birthday was yesterday, but you are still 5 years old." "I'm big now," Grace said seriously. "You are," Sarah agreed. "So big." They made pancakes together for breakfast, Grace standing on her step stool at the counter, helping Sarah mix the batter. They ate on the back porch, watching birds in the oak trees. After breakfast, they built a fort in the living room out of couch cushions and blankets. They read stories inside it, Grace's favorite, about a brave girl who saved her kingdom. This was Sarah's life now. Simple, quiet, peaceful. No mansions, no drama, no betrayal. Just her and Grace in their small, perfect world. Around noon, Sarah's phone buzzed. A message from the prison liaison who coordinated John's visits. "John Whitmore requesting extra visit this month for Grace's birthday. Please confirm." Sarah stared at the message. She could say no. The agreement was once a month. She did not owe John anything. But she thought about Grace's question yesterday. "Why does Daddy live far away?" Sarah wrote back, "Approved, Thursday at 2. Grace deserved to know her father tried. Even if he was a terrible person, even if he had destroyed their family, that was Grace's story to understand when she was older, to make sense of in her own way. Sarah's job was just to protect her daughter and give her the truth. The rest Grace would figure out herself. Thursday afternoon, Sarah drove Grace to the visitation center. Grace chattered the whole way about her birthday party, about the presents she got, about starting kindergarten in the fall. John was waiting in the visitation room. He had brought Grace a present, a small jewelry box with a ballerina that spun when you opened it. Grace loved it. She showed John her birthday dress, told him about all her friends, asked him questions about where he lived. Sarah watched through the window. John was trying. He was awkward, clearly uncomfortable, but he was trying. An hour later, when the visit ended, Grace hugged John goodbye. "Thank you for my present, Daddy," she said. "You are welcome, Gracie," John said. His voice cracked. "Happy birthday." In the car on the way home, Grace was quiet for a while. Then she said, "Daddy seems sad." "He is sad about some things," Sarah said carefully. "Because he does not live with us?" "Partly." "Do you think he wishes he made different choices?" Sarah thought about that. She did not know if John felt real remorse or just regret at getting caught. She did not know if he understood the depth of what he had destroyed. "I think he probably does," Sarah said. "But we cannot change the past. We can only decide how we move forward." "I am glad I met him," Grace said. "Even though he does not live with us. I am glad I know who he is." "I am glad too, baby." And Sarah manned it, because Grace deserved to know her whole story. The good and the bad, the broken pieces and the healed ones. That was life. Not winning or losing, just surviving, healing, and moving forward. That night, Sarah tucked Grace into bed in her room, painted soft lavender, filled with books and toys and drawings Grace had made. "Mommy, tell me the story about when I was born," Grace asked. She asked for this story often. Sarah settled on the edge of the bed. "You were born on May 15th at Stanford Hospital. You came 3 weeks early, which surprised everyone. Was I tiny? You were perfect. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, 20 inches long. You had dark hair and the most beautiful eyes. What did you think when you saw me?" Sarah smiled, remembering that moment. "I thought you were the most amazing thing I had ever seen. I thought, this is what I have been fighting for. This is why I survived everything." Grace thought about this. What were you fighting? Someday Sarah would tell her the whole story about John's betrayal, about the pregnancy complications, about the legal battle, when Grace was old enough to understand. But for now, Sarah just said, "I was fighting to make sure you would have a good life, a safe life, a happy life." Did you win? Sarah looked at her daughter, 5 years old, confident, curious, loved. growing up in a house filled with peace instead of chaos, with one parent who was present instead of two who were at war. Yes, Sarah said, I won. She kissed Grace's forehead, turned on the nightlight, and went to the door. Mommy? Grace called. Yes, baby. I love you. I love you too, Grace Catherine. More than anything in the world. Sarah closed the door and walked downstairs. She made herself tea and sat on the back porch, listening to the crickets in the garden. 5 years ago, she had been pregnant and alone, fighting to protect herself and her unborn child from the man who was supposed to love them both. Now she was here, safe, happy, whole. The journey had been brutal, but she had made it. And that, Sarah thought as she looked up at the stars, that was enough. Grace is 10 years old now, and she is everything Sarah hoped she would be. Smart, kind, confident. She plays soccer, loves science, wants to be an astronaut when she grows up. She sees John once a month still. The visits are less supervised now. Sarah trusts that John will not hurt Grace physically. Emotionally is another matter, but Grace is resilient. She understands, in the way children do, that her father is flawed but trying. Sarah never remarried. She dated a few people over the years, but nothing stuck. She is okay with that. She has Grace, she has her work with the foundation, she has friends and family, and a life she built from scratch. The Atherton mansion was torn down by its new owners and rebuilt into something even bigger. Sarah drives by it sometimes and feels nothing. That house was never home. This house, the Craftsman in Palo Alto, this is home. Melissa reached out again last year. She is no longer a lawyer, permanently disbarred. She works as a paralegal and volunteers at a women's shelter. She sent a letter saying she understood if Sarah could never forgive her, but she wanted Sarah to know she was sorry. Sarah wrote back, I appreciate your apology. I hope you have found peace, but I cannot have you in my life. I wish you well. Some bridges cannot be rebuilt, and that is okay. John still writes letters. Grace reads them now, writes back sometimes. Sarah does not interfere. This is Grace's relationship to navigate. But the letters John writes to Sarah still go into the box, unopened. 27 of them now, one for each month since he got out of prison. Sarah does not know what they say, does not care to know. Some stories do not get happy endings. Some people do not get redemption. And that is the truth of it. But Sarah and Grace, they got their happy ending. Not the one Sarah imagined when she married John all those years ago, but a better one, a real one, a life built on truth instead of lies, on strength instead of submission, on love that is genuine and earned and lasting. And that, Sarah thinks as she watches Grace kick a soccer ball in the backyard, is the best revenge of all. Not destroying John, not taking his money or his freedom, but building a beautiful life without him, proving that she never needed him to be complete, showing Grace what real strength looks like, what real love looks like, what a real parent does. Shows up every day, no matter how hard it gets. That is Sarah's legacy, not the company she built or the money she made, but Grace, this incredible human being she is raising. And nothing, not betrayal, not heartbreak, not all the pain of the past, can take that away from her. Sarah walks outside and joins Grace in the yard. They play until the sun sets, laughing and running and living. Just the two of them, together. And it is enough. It is more than enough. It is everything.